Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Badass Marketing. Once again, I am joined by the ever so lovely Angela Dunn. Angela, how are you?
I am doing great this morning. How about yourself, Mike?
I am tired. So we just came off of a weekend of events. We did a bunch of activity here in San Francisco where we were at Cinema on the Hill and outdoor cinema. Um, Friday and Saturday. Sunday was Fiesta on the Hill. We did a lot of work leading up to that. Um, But I think that's a great opportunity to remind folks that brand awareness can actually happen in the real world. We're very focused on things to do online and SEO and all that other thing. But there's this place out there called the real world, and where you actually come in contact with other human beings. And this should obviously be part of your mix when it comes to outreach, creating awareness, things like that, of doing things offline. Go figure. But there
I
is the
think
offline world.
it's an absolutely excellent topic, and I have actually been toying with the idea of not working with clients who aren't out there in the real world doing things. I ran into a super interesting situation with two of my clients who are, well, they're approaching retirement, but they still want to run their business for another 1 to 3 years. And they quit networking. They just chose that they didn't want to expose themselves to things anymore. They didn't want to leave the house. And that's a great choice. And we get to run our businesses exactly the way we want to, what works for us, but they were not meeting any new people. And
Right, but these are folks that are on the other side of the business cycle, right? So they're past the point of creating awareness. They obviously have it if they've been in business quite a few years. Um, so they've chosen to sort of do additional marketing, they're relying on their existing base, I would assume.
well, they wanted to gear things up because they wanted to sell the business. And it really just, what they wanted was not possible.
Well, it sounds counterintuitive, right? They want to, in order to sell the business, you try to make your numbers as good as possible, generate as much revenue as possible. And that's business development. So, you can't have it both ways. You know what I mean? Like, if you stop creating brand awareness, it's just inevitable that, your deal flow will be impacted by that.
Well, and the other thing that I think worked against them was as you're getting older, a lot of your client base is too, and they're gone. They're just not there anymore. And if you're not doing business development and letting, those younger partners and the younger people at your firm know what it is that you do, then good luck. There's somebody else that's willing to step into that space.
So let's identify, first of all, let's start at the beginning, and let's identify what we're talking about when we talk about offline. I just mentioned that we just came off of a weekend of events. So these are events. So it was a street fair, it was a film festival, and we were at these events trying to create brand awareness, creating brand awareness, by being there, by talking to the audience, talking to people. We did some activities to engage with the folks, whether it was raffles or projects, things like that. But we created activities so that we had reasons to come join us and come interact with us. But we had, I think, a relatively successful weekend in creating brand awareness. Is that we got a tremendous amount of signups. People were learning about the different projects that we're working on and were aware of them. So we were very excited to create that exposure, and we did that through attending actual events. But there are so events is one, and there are some other sort of offline activities. You are a big fan of public speaking, so why don't you take that one?
I am. And I am so excited because public speaking is coming back. The in real life aspect of public speaking. There is nothing like meeting somebody face to face. There is just a different energy and a different kind of rapport, a different relationship that is built when you can look people in the eye, not on a flat screen, and interact with them. So public speaking is, I mean, it continues to be the number one business builder. I don't care if you're a climbing socialite in a corporate setting or if you're an entrepreneur. Public speaking is still the number one way to build your business. And it is that instant rapport and instant relationship. I just had somebody call me that saw me speak 5 years ago, and we're now doing business together. So it is something that if you leave an
Quite the long lead
impression,
cycle.
well, if you leave a lasting impression,
All right.
when they need you, they still remember you. But other
And go ahead. Sorry.
there's lots of other things. I mean, conferences are coming back. I have heard of so many people going to conferences. And there's networking events that you can attend in real life these days. Even if you belong to a group, people are trying to create either social or strictly networking types of events where you actually get to shake hands with people, and exchange business cards if that's still a thing.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, so you and I met via networking. So, it was a non-digital type of environment. And there is a tremendous difference, right? I mean, I think that networking online is tremendously efficient. We can do it
Yes.
in our boxers, so we appreciate that. And we can sort of
No
roll out of
pants.
bed. No pants, don't stand up, no pants. So we're all about that no pants marketing. But if you do go meet folks in person, we do recommend pants or some sort of
Yes.
appropriate attire. But having said that, it's a different experience than when we meet people in person. You and I have known each other a long time, so we're likely to give each other a hug. And it's a different environment. The last time you and I met in person, we sat down, had a glass of wine, we got to share that
Oh, it
experience.
was wonderful.
Right. So, just it's a different experience and a different touch point. Again, we love the efficiency of online networking, but we also try to mix in some in-person live events to facilitate and to create another touch point so that folks remember us and see us. And then networking to the next level is then following that up with one-to-ones, where not networking in a group, but networking one-to-one. Because that gives you the opportunity to, explore, talk about things that you may not talk in a larger group. Most of the time when I do networking one-on-one, you learn about their family, you learn about some of their background, you learn about pets, whatever, and try to find something in common so that you have that commonality. We know all about Angela's pets and we know about my dog. So,
Oh my
finding
goodness.
that connection that is beyond just the work world. Most of us, some of us, have lives outside of the office or outside of Zoom, even
Tiny
better,
lives.
outside of Zoom, right? We do exist beyond Zoom, so this is that opportunity. You mentioned conferences. We're going to a conference in Chicago the first week of October, and this is the
How
first conference
exciting.
in, I think, at least 4 years, right?
Oh my gosh.
Because pandemic, all conferences started, people were a little hesitant to get back into that market, but so this is going to be our first full-blown let's go share germs with everybody in Chicago. So Chicago, we look forward to seeing you, and we look forward to sharing germs. But we're the conferences are back, and we're meeting folks live and in mass.
And we talk a lot about that whole know, like, and trust factor. That's something that's essential, for
Sure.
actually creating and cultivating business. And yes, we love online networking. Nobody loves it more than me. I'm an introvert. I love to be able to sit with my kittens in the privacy of my home and network online. But I think the know, like, and trust factor is actually cultivated quicker when you meet people in person. And so using the two in tandem and complementing that initial connection that you make with somebody in real life, by using the digital platform is really a win-win.
I mean, an interesting experience for us over the weekend. Again, we were at a street fair, and we have been working and promoting ourselves primarily digitally for the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 months and stuff like that. And so for a lot of people, this was the first time they were meeting us in person. And, they were very excited because they had the brand awareness because they had seen us online. They had seen us on Facebook. They had seen us on other digital platforms. They probably got an email from us or something along those lines. But, now they were able to connect what they're seeing online with a real person, with a real organization. But a lot of people commented like, oh my God, we've been, following your activities. We're excited about that. And it's so great to meet you in person. So that added aspect of that.
Well, and I think there's a great deal of credibility that instantly gets established if you see somebody as a real human being. I don't know what the mental disconnect is if somebody's just a face in a box on Zoom. But when you meet them in real life, it's like, oh, yeah, they're a real human being right here in front of me.
But I don't want to negate the fact that we had done a bunch of work online before that. So that really, like, when these people were meeting us for the first time in person, they weren't meeting us for the first time, right? This was
Right,
another way of engaging with us, but they knew of us. They knew what we were working on. They knew what we were doing. So we had already created the awareness. This just created another touch point to further solidify the awareness. But we were able, the difference here was it wasn't like we were meeting them for the first time in their mind. It wasn't like, walking up to a stranger like, hey, I'm meeting you on the street at some fiesta, and no one's going to remember that because, there were cocktails involved. So, the advantage to us is having done the brand awareness online in advance. These people, while they were meeting us for the first time in person, weren't meeting us for the first time.
right.
We already had some form of brand awareness that was already out there, and that really worked in our favor because they felt like they knew us, they knew what we were about, they knew what we were working on. And this was just another touch point that further solidified that awareness. So that, the combination of online and offline sort of paid off as a result because, they got to meet us in person, they got to realize that we're real, but they also already had some awareness of us.
Yeah, and like I said, in tandem is the win-win. The in-person after the online kind of seals the deal that they have chosen you as a service provider.
And then we'll follow that up, right? So, for the folks that, we did the same thing. We collected business cards with a whole bunch of folks that, they offered to us. We actually weren't soliciting them, but they gave us our business cards. So we now have another opportunity to create another touch point by like, hey, it was so nice to see you. And, the one guy was an insurance agent. So I'm like, oh, we need D&O insurance. So like, we could do some business to further solidify that. We're working on some community profiles. So this is really an opportunity after the fact, now that we have met them in person, to follow back up with them and stay in front of them to remain top of mind.
And it just makes that digital follow-up that you're going to do, or by phone, whichever one, it just makes
Right.
it that much warmer. You already,
Yeah, because they
you
know us,
know
and
something about
it's not
them.
spam. It's somebody they've met, somebody they've engaged with. I know what they're looking for. I can respond to that need because we've had a dialogue in person. So that's a great opportunity to create the additional touch point. We know we need a bunch of them to stay in front of people and to be top of mind, which is ultimately the goal of brand awareness.
And last Friday, I went to a barbecue for the um, networking group that I belong to, and there was over 100 people there. Now, I have a list on my notebook of, I don't know, 4 pages of tasks that have to be done. I got rid of at least one page of them just by talking to people in
Hmm.
real life at that event. And it was just so much more efficient to say, hey, instead of you doing that writing activity, let's do an interview of you. I'll use the transcript to finish up the stuff that I need to do. And he gave me a hug. Now, that doesn't happen if you're not in real life. It,
I mean, the other thing that's interesting is, there's definitely the potential for a different persona online than in real life. I mean, because and maybe less with Zoom because we get to see each other and we get the physical. But I remember in the early days back in the Stone Age when, most of our communication was on the phone or something like that. I remember like having a conversation or having a business relationship um, with this company and primarily dealing through this one individual. And I talked to this individual for over 3 years, but had never met her in person. And that was very interesting to finally meet her in person because it was an entirely different person than I had expected. Not in a good way, not in a bad way, just different. It was just like I had only a voice to go by and had created this persona. It's not unlike reading a book where you create this, image of what you think the character is. And that's why we all hate the movie
right.
version because it doesn't match.
Yes.
But what's interesting is once you do meet that person in person, then they become more real. They're taller, shorter, fatter, skinnier, whatever it is that they are in person. They may be about 20 years older than their LinkedIn bio pic than that they're
Grayer.
still right. So I mean you get to meet and the real person and where they're at. And also, we can make some small talk so we get to know about them, we get to know about their families, we get to know about what's going on with them, which is further sort of that know, like, and trust, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I had a friend a long time ago that I used to do enterprise sales training with, and he used to always say this thing: we don't do business with glass building. We do business with human beings. And that human being, whether you like cats or dogs or whatever that thing is, it
Yeah,
just
and the thing is you never know what resonates with them. So
yes.
we've done a tremendous amount of work creating content and just like trying to find all the right messaging. And then we'll talk to the client. We're like, well, so why, how did you find us? Why did you, pick us and stuff like that? And they're like, oh yeah, you had that one picture with the dog in the background that I really like dogs. Like, all right, whatever worked, like whatever got us here, which
It's the
is
human element.
we spend hours and hours over, what's the exact keyword and all that, and they're looking at the dog picture. So
Yes, all our best intentions.
yeah, but we need to understand that people,
Yes.
connect on different ways and on different levels. And the offline is yet another touch point. So, it's really a great opportunity to further solidify, your brand awareness.
Well, and the other thing that's, we don't make logical decisions in business. We might tell ourselves that we do. We might use statistics to back all of that up. We really make emotional business decisions. And I
Sure.
think the whole in real life networking helps us create that emotional connection that really greases the wheels for the possibility of business to happen.
And I also wanted to sort of touch on the point that I realize that some people find in person to be uncomfortable. And I've been
Me,
network
I'm one of those.
I've been
I,
networking for about 100 years, and or at least it feels that way, right? But I
yes.
remember the early days of walking into like a chamber event with 300
Oh my
people.
God.
Like there
My
was nothing
worst
more
nightmare.
painful, right? Nothing more painful than trying to work a cold room where you just like trying to push your business card on a bunch of other service providers who are trying to push their business card. So I'm aware of, and since we're talking about offline marketing, want to talk about there are some challenges with offline marketing. not everybody is comfortable walking into a room and like just trying to strike up small talk. You know, I have probably, at least in my early days, I seem to have gotten over this, or I've been so long that it's very rare that I get to walk into a room where I don't know somebody, which does break the ice, right? But you know, like in those early days, like I remember I sat in the corner and like that was a sucky event. Nobody talked to me. I didn't talk to anyone, but somehow it was their fault that I hadn't done anything or hadn't reached out. Um, you know, there's a bunch of people in
And
the
it,
room feeling the exact same way that you feel as far
yes,
as not wanting to be approached. For me, some of the ways to overcome that was to pair up with people so that at least you weren't walking into the room by yourself.
yes,
You know, and you know what's interesting is once you can get past that and you can sort of break the ice, then it becomes so much easier. You know, because then someone will introduce you, or you know, you just feel more comfortable because you've had a couple glasses of wine, usually cheap wine because it's a social event. But nonetheless, you know, just having, you know, understanding what the challenges are for you at when it comes to networking in person. We in a previous life, we did a fair amount of conferences, as in like more than 50% of our time were conference based. And I, you know, I wouldn't say, yeah, I would say I was an introvert, but I had to go work the conference circuit so that I wasn't, you know, from a career perspective, I didn't have that choice. I had to go do it regardless of how I felt. However, I understood what my limitations were, you know, and I think that like how to make things work for you. In the conference world, I knew basically that I had about 3 or 4 hours in me of small talk and sort of schmoozing before I'm starting to get cranky, which is not a good, um, you know, headspace to try to be meeting new people. You know, so when I got to that 3 hours and I got that sense that I wasn't enjoying it anymore, I went and I took a break. I either, you know, left the event or, you know, at least at the minimum, took a little bit of a break away from trying to make small talk because I knew that was my limit. I sort of knew that I was better off stepping away for a couple of minutes to, you know, regauge or
recharge. Yeah,
yeah, because it's, you know, it's very draining, especially when you're spending a lot of time trying to meet, you know, new people. It's obviously a
right.
little bit easier if you already know. But I'm also going to caution you again when it comes to in-person events. You know, I have also been guilty of going to in-person events and chatting up all the people I already know.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Too
Right.
easy.
You know, and I'm like, oh, I didn't meet anybody new. I was like, yeah, because I spent the whole time hanging out with my buddies and having a great time. Um, but you know, you need to be aware of that as well, because that is sort of the default comfort place is to go approach people that already know you and that you already know. But if you're trying to create awareness, these folks have that. So why would you continue to work on that? Sometimes during that process, people will walk into the circle and be introduced, and that's that opportunity. But be sensitive to either going to an event and not talking to anybody, or going to an event and only talking to the folks that you already know, because that won't create additional awareness, which is probably the primary reason why you went to the event.
Right. Yes. I used to have to make deals with myself. I would sit in the car before I went into a networking event and I would say, okay, if I meet three new people, I can go home. And and that worked for me until I figured out if I invited a buddy to go with me that was an extrovert, then I wouldn't have to make those deals with myself. It would just happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna caution you on that one, right? Is if you're an introvert and you partner with the extrovert, I've been in that situation where
You
the
have to
extrovert
leave
takes
early.
over. Well, but no, but
Oof.
also the extrovert takes over because they're an extrovert, and you know you end up in their shadow. So be careful that you don't invite someone who is
You have
going
to
to
choose the right
outshine you.
person.
Yeah,
Right.
because
And you
you
have to
know,
make the deal with them. Please introduce me to the appropriate people.
right. But I had a friend. I remember we were doing networking in healthcare in Spain, and I had a friend, and this woman, God love her, she knew every single person at every event. Like we couldn't move 5 feet without talking to like three people because like you know we'd walk into healthcare conferences and like you know we would barely get through the door before we were doing that. And and it was amazing. But she was an extrovert and she was able, but she also, made it a point to go and meet people. And she was extremely gracious about those introductions. So, if you are comfortable in the networking setting, try to find the person who's not, or try to find somebody who's new and doesn't know a lot of people in the room and make those introductions. That's sort of the give if you're going to, in that situation of, help the person who is either struggling or new to this or just doesn't know a bunch of people in the room to break the ice, because that's the hardest thing about in-person networking is this idea of like having to approach a stranger. Nobody wants to do that. I don't, even if you're an extrovert, I don't think you want to approach a stranger. You're just better at it. But so if you are a networker or you are established within the group that you're at, make it a point to introduce people, make it a point to make those introductions. Because people will remember that you did that. My
Yes.
friend in Spain, I tell people all the time, you have to connect with her. She's the best connector ever. So I refer back to her just for her connecting skills, because she can make some introductions, and by doing so, she creates awareness around what she's working on and the projects that she's working on as well.
Right. Well, making a thoughtful connection is a huge deal. Of
Mhm.
course, that's going to be memorable. So, what I want to talk about next is follow up. For the event that I went to, it was a really super fun event. Very casual. It was a picnic setting on a Friday night. I made connections with a lot of people, some of them new ones. But how much time should people really expect to sit down? You've got a lot of follow up to do from the event that you did over the weekend. And, that whole event is really not all that effective if you don't do the follow up. So, what should people's expectations be for an event like that, or a conference, or a public speaking event? How much follow up should they do?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things. Some of them you asked and some of you didn't, and I'm going to go down that path anyway. One of the things is I'm not a big proponent, like, so this was an event that happened yesterday, which was a Sunday, right? So I'm not a proponent of like slamming these people first thing Monday morning, like, hey, remember me? I met you yesterday. So I will circle back around either tomorrow being Tuesday or Wednesday, 2 or 3 days after the event, because most people coming off of an event, we going into the event didn't do a bunch of stuff. So we've spent a better part of today and probably tomorrow just doing catch up. So, the opportunity to, read somebody's email and, sort of make that connection, we give it a day or two. Okay. And then one of the things that we try really hard to do, and I know a lot of the people that we met yesterday, either know them or know of them, is understanding sort of what the need was or what the connection was.
Yes.
So one gentleman, we had said, look, we've actually been talking to him for a while, but haven't been able to make the timing work out as far as doing something together. So now, like, hey, it was nice to see you. Let's get something on the calendar. Let's get something solid. So I now have that, and I know that's the need, is we actually need to finally get together to do something. Another one was just follow up, like, we need to do some business. And it's just transactional in nature, and that email we did send this morning, say, look, here's what we need, send us a quote, those types of things. But if you can go beyond the, hey, it was nice to meet you, and sort of add some sort of personalization, whether it's like, oh, I'm following up on our conversation, or thank you for allowing me to use the pickup truck to haul all of my junk back and forth from the event. But for me, give them a day or two, right? Because they're coming off the event just like you're coming off the event, and again, they probably have things. It's Monday. Nobody does anything on Monday. It's and then try to find that personal connection when you go to re-engage with them. Like, try to remember something that you guys talked about, try to remember something. And I know a lot of people are much better at it than this. I tend to go by memory, and these days that's not a reliable thing, but we do. But I know some people will get a business card and then make a note that, oh, like I talked about this and this with so and so, and I, so that when they go for that follow up, they do know what it was. Yeah.
Yes.
We also had, so one of the interesting things, and I'm just going to share this, and I'd be interested in your response, but because we've done sort of the work that to create awareness in advance, people were coming up to us and talking to us like they knew us, and I have no idea who these people are. So I'm just kind of playing along with like, hey, you, like, who was that? So at some point, if you don't know who you're talking to, you might actually check in and like, oh, remind me again how we know, because there were a couple of folks that just came up to us. There was one gentleman who came up and he was extremely friendly. He's, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever. And I'm looking at, my business partner, and I'm like, I have no idea. I just don't. And then he's like, you need to call me. We need to follow up. And he gave me his business card. And I was like, oh, right. I remember you. So, but how do you handle that when you run into somebody that you're supposed to know, but it is not coming to you?
Oh my gosh. I do awkward in 100 different ways. Um, and that did happen to me twice at the picnic.
Yeah.
And my dilemma is if I've spoken at an event someplace, I haven't met every single person in the room
And people
or
know you, but you don't know.
in the Zoom room or whatever the situation might be. And this woman came up to me and she's like, "Hey, we're supposed to get together." And I was racking my brain and racking my brain and racking my brain. And finally she just said, "What is your name again?" I mean, she knew me, but she didn't remember my name. So she kind of gave me an in and she said, "Can you, and then I said, "Can you remind me how we met?"
Yeah.
And so that one I got out of the whole awkward thing because she went there for me. Um, but yeah, no, you have to ask if they don't have one of the guys, I said, "Are we connected on LinkedIn?" And he said, "No, I don't think so." So we both took out our phones and I said,
Right.
"Can you spell your name for me so I can look you?"
Yeah. He's like Bob, B-O-B.
And it was Bob. His name is Bob, which
You
is
just
too
spell your
funny.
name. Thanks.
But so yeah, I'm trying to use more clever ways to get less awkward about doing that sort of thing. But it happens to me all the time and it's so embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I don't know that I feel embarrassed, but it's just like, oh, I have no idea who I'm talking to, and and this person obviously knows who I am and stuff like that. Um,
It's a
which is always kind
disadvantage.
of interesting. Yeah, but that is part of awareness. Like we have created that awareness, so people do know. So like
Yes.
it's doing exactly what we want to do. We just have to manage sort of the interaction so that we don't blow it. Like because we can create awareness in a bad way too, by like
Yes.
being a person. So what I mean? Where so you don't want to create awareness and then create negativity that further cements your awareness as being that person. So you try to juggle that, but it was kind of awkward because he went on for a while, and I was like,
I got
and
nothing.
it turns out that we had met in the fall, so like almost a year ago at an event, and like once I realized who he was, like the pieces came back to me again. I'm old, there's a little bit of Alzheimer's, whatever, to work through that. So once I understood who he was, and I remembered, okay, I met him at this event. This is
Then you can
that kind
catch up
of
in the
thing.
conversation.
Yeah. But he did go on for a while, and I was like, I'm not sure who this is, but he seems to know me, so I'm gonna go with it. So
Yeah, and I'm not afraid to be wrong. I can say, "Are you a friend of so and so's?" And they'll say, "No, we met through blah blah blah." Then I can get back on track.
right. But that is a good question. How did remind me how we met? Remind me, just like you know, we all see a lot of people on a lot of different, and I have, and I'm guessing maybe you've experienced this as well, is we do see people on Zoom, and for whatever reason, we don't actually recognize them when we see them in person, right? Because we've
Yeah.
just had a talking head for a while, and like when you meet them in person, you're like, oh my God, you're short.
I just met somebody who barely comes up to my elbow, it seemed like. And seeing her on
Yeah,
Zoom
and
is a
not that we're
completely
opposed to that.
different.
So I'm so just to
Yes,
clarify.
and no, she's the most, I love her. She's just a wonderful person. But we've been meeting together for 2 years and working on all kinds of projects. I had no idea what her size was. And it was just such a surprise. I had to recover from it.
I mean, and the other interesting experience that I've had recently is I'm going to a set of events with a group of people that I used to engage with 20 years ago. And for a variety of reasons, and living in Europe for 10 of those, I haven't seen some of these folks in 20 years. And it's been interesting because some people will remember me and I won't remember them, and we have to sort of like sort that out. Or I'll have to remind people like, yeah, I knew you 20 years ago. And they're like, oh, okay, and give them the context of how we knew each other in the previous life, that type of thing. Um, but we'll offer it to them so that like they don't have to sit there wondering like, who is this person talking to me?
Right.
Who appears to know me, but I don't know them, right?
Well,
So
and I think
solve that
that's just,
awkwardness for them if you can.
yeah, that is something, a little bit of personal awareness. If somebody looks like they're not recognizing you, to give them that context up front, really being assertive about the communication and in giving them that context is really just a wonderful professional courtesy. I think we can all remember that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to help facilitate the dialogue. So, whether it's helping making introductions on someone's behalf, especially if they're new to to the room, or just, rather than making people try to remember where they know you from, just tell them where this is how we know each other. Or, you may recall we met back, at this event and, talked about this and stuff. I'm like, oh, right, right. I didn't like you then and I don't like you now, but okay.
Well, yes, and that is the sorting factor. Is it a yes or is it a no? You need to be efficient when you're in person networking.
Oh, I got one for you for in-person networking. What do you do when you see that nemesis across the room?
Avert your eyes, avert your eyes, avert your eyes.
Yeah, I love when you run into somebody that you probably would rather not, and
Yes.
then just to make a beeline for you, and you're like, there's no escaping it. Right?
Oh, yep. Best to deal with that stuff head on. If they're making a beeline for you, oh, I was just going to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I mean, typically what I will do is engage with them for a couple of minutes and then try to excuse myself. Well, like, oh, I need to make a lap in the room, or I need to see
Right.
so and so just walked in. I need to catch up with them. It's been great talking to you. Hope to see you soon. Not if I see you first, but they've made the connection. I can be polite for a couple of minutes, and then try to extract myself from that situation, because I already know where it's going, that kind of thing.
Yes. Yes. Oh, so like awkward,
Yeah,
very awkward.
but we're working on a project, and it's a project that is very similar to a project that we did 10 years ago. So we have the advantage of the past experience of what worked, what didn't work, and we're working with a new group, and trying to help them and facilitate this. And when I did that project, I think it's been 20 years. So when I did that project, um, I was working with a partner, and that partner is like, you need to come to lunch with me, and you need to, and I'm like, all right, we'll do lunch. What I can do. It's like, no, no, no. We're going to lunch at this specific location. And we were doing some business in the old Navy shipyard. And this restaurant sits like right outside. And it's sort of the place where everybody who's related to the shipyard and the work around the shipyard goes for lunch. So it wasn't that this place served, incredible food. It didn't. But it was the place to network, and it was the place to meet the people.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things is also like, where do the people that you want to meet congregate? So for us, it was, an amazing entree into this network. by just going out and having lunch at the right place where the club hung out per se, the folks that were doing all the work out at the shipyard. And just by going there, and then,
You're being seen.
you're being seen. She knew people, so there were introductions being made. But if there's a place like that, whether it's a networking event or just a hangout, to go and hang out with where your audience is and go to them.
Well, and that brings up another great point. One of my friends said, Angela, you've got to join this attorneys group, because if you do, they'll let you speak at their conference. And, if it's not that terribly expensive and it's your ideal audience in huge numbers, why wouldn't you do something like that? I mean, that is a continuation of your brand awareness to a whole new set of people. And maybe there's some that already know you there, and that just warms the whole thing up.
Yeah, but one of the things that we do, for instance, we're going to this conference at the beginning of October, and like the first thing I asked the partner that we're working with on this, I was like, what is our goal from this conference? Like, what do we want to walk away from the conference with? And he's like, okay, I want these types of, I want to meet these types of people with these particular titles. And it was very clarifying to have sort of a plan and some KPIs in advance of what we want to accomplish. So, we are traveling, we're spending some money, we're going to stay for a week. In order to get that ROI, I needed to understand, okay, what's the outcome that we are working towards? And it was, okay, I want to meet this specific demographic and, meet them and get those connections and stuff like that. So I have gone to many conferences. The nice thing about this is it's all in the past, so I can talk about it and not feel terribly bad about it, but unprepared, right? Just like, there's a conference next week, whatever, I'll deal with it when I get there. And have even done that when it comes to speaking engagements, where I'm like, oh, I'll just make something up when I get there, and it doesn't go well. It just doesn't. So if you're going to do this networking and you're going to seek out these type of events, you really want a plan of how to attack this. You really want to understand what is your objective by going to this particular event. Who do you want to meet? Why do you want to meet them? What do you want to happen? We talked about the nightmare of going to the old chamber events, right? Because a chamber event, at least for me, has been a whole room full of service providers looking for that one poor soul who is either a buyer or someone. So, accountants, bookkeepers, lawyers, coaches, all trying to find a client, in a room full of service providers.
Where they should be looking for relationships and referral partnerships rather than
right. Or
client.
Maybe that wasn't the right event, right? Maybe that wasn't the right audience.
Right.
It's a room full of service
Exactly.
providers. Maybe that's not the best use of your time, but to sort of plan that out, like, okay, if you're going to an event and the room is a room full of service providers, what is your plan? And maybe, like you said, your plan was, let's formulate partnerships, let's formulate introductions that might result in referrals, but that at least has a plan to it versus just walking into the room and like, another lawyer, because we love them.
Right. I would say fewer, but do it more effectively.
Have a plan and have an objective of what you had talked about earlier about being in the car and making a deal with yourself, but basically you come up with a KPI. You're like, I need to talk to 3 people before I can leave, and my reward is I get to leave.
Yes, exactly.
But you walked away, and the interesting thing was, and I'm gonna ask you this because I know from my own experiences, I set myself up with that 3 goal. Once I've broken through the ice for 2 or 3 of them, I end up talking to more than the 3 that I negotiated with myself.
I usually stayed almost until the end of the event.
Because once you broke the ice and you started to talk to people,
you relax, it flows. It's
different. The wine kicked in. But so you can make yourself this deal that I'll stay for 3 connections. But once you sort of get into it, then it's like it's not that bad, and you usually exceed your own limit. At least I haven't historically. Like, oh, it wasn't too bad. But I've also known, or like, I should just go home. I'm not in the right headspace. I'm not in the right mood. I should go home before I make this worse.
And if you're going to hurt your brand, you should do that.
Just go home. Yeah, it's not a good thing. Um, what else we got? We have conferences, one-on-ones, networking, public speaking, events. What other offline? We have, what other offline events should we think about and sort of cover before we wrap up?
Well, even the social events, like the picnic that I went to, and I know that attorneys do an awful lot of charity events and, that sort of thing. So there's, it could be, where's your audience? That's the question. Where
Like,
is
I like
your,
chat up people in the dog park. So
well,
what are you
and
working on? What do you need?
well, if it's a Warriors game or,
Yeah,
an alumni event, it's lots of different opportunities. You just really have to think about where is your audience and what is your KPI for that event. Otherwise,
right.
just go and enjoy the Warriors game and feel free from business.
Especially if someone else is taking, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, and that's how it happens sometimes. Hey, I got tickets, and they're a client or a prospect or a referral partner or whatever it is. Those are wonderful opportunities, but you still should have some KPIs for those events.
And here's the last thing I'm going to bring up, because I am terribly guilty of this one. So I'm going to bring it up because I do it myself and I know I shouldn't. Um, the, dress appropriately for these events, right? I have a tendency to be a little too casual for many events. And, and I remember, like, I was at some event and a friend of mine came up and, like, you're not dressed for this event. So be aware of the audience, be aware of what other folks are wearing, or you think other people are going to be wearing. So that you dress appropriately and present yourself in the light that you want people to see you in.
Yes, whatever you wear, I mean, right down to the jewelry and whatever it is, it's an extension of your brand.
Yeah.
It is a part of your brand. So, and be mindful of the type of event and the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting in our early days. We had sort of come out of a suit and tie culture and went to for a couple of events in a
Very
suit and tie,
much.
and people were like, "Yeah, we're in California, we don't do that." So, and so it was just a sort of figuring out, like, what is the right look, what's appropriate. The suit and tie was too stuffy. It was more of a sports jacket, open collar kind of event. But you kind of find that, and that's also part of networking, because that your presentation is part of your branding, and that's obviously, don't overlook that. Do your homework before you go to the event. Make sure that you know what you're trying to accomplish by coming to the event, and then if you're going to go through the effort of going, then go. Just show up, be there, be present, engage. Even if you have to promise yourself something to get you there, by all means.
Yes.
So offline is just another great opportunity to create another touch point. And we know we need multiple touch points to create awareness. This is just a different experience. It tends to be different as far as, meeting someone in person, giving them a hug, checking them out, like, oh my God, you're so much different than I expected. Whatever it is, you get to meet the real person, you get to experience them, they get to experience you, you become more real in their mind, hopefully more memorable. So we highly recommend that in your marketing mix, you add these offline components and go out and meet real people. It's not a bad thing.
Create an excellent mix for your business.
Angela, as always, a pleasure. I'm not going to pressure you on what we're doing next time, because we never can seem to figure that out in advance. So we'll just surprise you next time. If you enjoy these
Excellent.
conversations, hopefully you're getting something out of them. Hopefully we're helpful. At the minimum, you're learning from our mistakes, and we can be a good example of things not to do. So if at a very minimum that you get that out of us, we appreciate that as well. Leave us a comment below, like it, share it, tell your friends. And we'll see you in Dog Park.
Excellent. Take care, everybody.